All right, we're back. 2224, Common Sense, Ohio. That's 2224. The numbers sort of, I don't know, they tickle me somehow. Anyway, Common Sense, Ohio, coming at you week in and week out from Ohio, right from the middle, as we like to say. Brought to you, of course, by Harper Plus Accounting. My accountant could be yours. And, as Brett's pointing to his Harper Plus, I think of a coffee mug, tumbler. I don't know what the hell that is, but anyway, it's a fancy
probably
mug.
an espresso thing, which never has touched espresso.
Right. But Harper Plus Accounting, it is that time. I dare you to try to get a hold of your accountant right now, or you better get a hold of your accountant now, because in about 3 weeks you won't be able to get a hold of your accountant. But not at Harper Plus. They've got a team that helps me plan all year long, even in their busiest season. I will give them a little bit of slack, of course, in March and April, because they are really, really busy. But Harper Plus Accounting bringing Common Sense Ohio to you week in and week out. And if you want to check out the old episodes, you go to commonsenseohioshow.com, where you can catch the catalog of old episodes. We're on video now, so you can check us out on Facebook, YouTube, wherever they have videos. It's above my pay grade. We've got the people here fixing that up. Norm, typically here, not. I guess he's got a mouthful of gauze from a dentist visit. But filling a seat, we have a guest. We have George Pardos. And if you don't know George Pardos, I didn't until he called me, but he has something really, really cool in town. And anybody who's listened to the backlog of shows knows that we sort of have a special place for the veterans organizations and the veterans who have served the country, ironically, because I never did. And maybe that's my own thought. Sometimes I tell myself, like, if I have one regret, I didn't go serve back when I was right out of high school or right out of college. And I don't know if I have guilt for that, but it's one of those things that I sort of think, yeah, that would have been a good thing to do.
I think every 18-year-old boy thinks about it.
And
it goes through their head. It does, because, hey, in high school, you get the recruiters coming in, talking to you. It's an option. Yep. It just comes down to what you want to do with your life. And those that serve, thank God they did and do.
And my dad used to say, life was our country was better when everybody had to serve. The military was better and the population was better and everybody was a little bit more mature and a little bit more capable. The merits of that, we don't need to debate it here. But his idea was, if you're going to college, do it 3 years after, and you're a little bit more mature. So you don't go to college just to get drunk for 4 years. You actually have a goal. And I'm proud to say my son's plan right now is to go into the military and then do something afterwards. But anyway, George, welcome to the show. First time here at Channel 511 or Studio C at Channel 511. Why don't we just start? Introduce yourself, man.
Yeah. All right. My name is George Pardos. So I'm a Marine veteran and a 12-year Army veteran as well. So I did the same thing. I got out of high school, went to the Marine Corps, and then
there we go. Now he's on the mic, guys.
Went to the Marine Corps, then got out of the Marine Corps, went to Ohio State, graduated from Ohio State. So, my dad was a machinist, so I don't want to have the burden of him having to pay for my school. So at the time, the Marine Corps had a nice, whatever you want to call it, a nice package for, the military did in the 80s. They had the GI Bill. They had Veterans Assistance. So go in the Marine Corps.
I sense a little bit of ethnicity. Greek?
Yeah, a little bit. It's Irish, actually.
Irish?
No, I'm Greek. I mean, we...
well, they're the Greek Irish. There's a history there that's interesting. Yeah. The Black Irish.
So... my dad, I was born in Greece and came over here when I was young. And so I didn't want to go to college. I saw that some of my counterparts would go to college and be drunk at Papa Joe's. And so if you'd ever been on campus,
Ohio State campus you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, Ohio State campus. Our family had the Athenan Village dollar euros that is right across the street.
They've had some of my dollars over the years.
Yeah. So, we had seen how they grew up, and I was like, I don't know that I'm ready. 18, I was like, so I enlisted in the Marine Corps at 17, got into the late entry program, and then, I graduated June 4th, and June 11th, I was in boot camp at Parris Island.
Wow.
So, and my dad,
So what year are we talking?
1984.
84. Mm-hmm. So you got a few years on me.
So my dad, when he signed off, it was the funniest thing ever. My dad, in his, he used a colloquialism, but when he signed off at 17, you had to get your parents' permission. So my dad said, I need you to make two promises. One, I don't want you to get any tattoos like those damn street urchins, which is and number two, I don't want you to get dead.
So no tattoos and don't die. I mean, look, I can understand the order of that at least. I'd prefer.
And I was like,
you would think that maybe the don't get dead first.
Well, it was the tattoos. That was more. And so, my dad grew up in an era, so I joined the Marine Corps. And in 87, 88, I was good enough to wrestle for the Marine Corps. I was on the All Marine wrestling team, and that is what got me to Ohio State. And
so you grew up in Central Ohio, Columbus?
Yeah, I went to school at Westland.
Okay.
Oh, okay. And it was just a little. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's just a little school out in Galloway.
Yep.
Mixed. It was a mixed background. Most of it was farm kids. Used to work at Darby Dan Farms, Hoffman Farms out there. So, and got out, stayed in the reserves, stayed in the National Guard, and served until 2000. And so I had a chance to do some really wonderful things. I wrestled for the Army in 1997. So I had a very, decent career. Just got hurt and just couldn't keep going. So
why'd you choose the Marines?
Greg Gibson. Greg Gibson I wrestled. So Greg Gibson was by far probably the most decorated Marine wrestler. Got a chance to go see him wrestle. They had at Toledo. I don't know if you remember Toledo. They had the World Cup, and they used to have this wrestling tournament. So we go up there, and I see Greg Gibson, and he is just a monster, 220 pounds, and he wrestled 220. He was 1984 silver medalist, but I got to see him, before
in the Olympics.
Yeah, in the Olympics. He was 1981 world champion in Sambo, and he was just a national champion. And I go up there, get the chance to see him wrestle, and the Marine Corps had his wrestling program. I'm like, that's what I want to do. So eventually, that's what I did. In 1988, I represented the Marine Corps at the Olympic trials. So I had a pretty good run. And at the Army at the time, I just they didn't have some of the things that I was looking for, and and looking back, I should have went in the Air Force, but I had wanted to do some things, and you got to remember 1984, Reagan was in office. The economy was actually very good, and so people were having a harder time getting people to go into the military. We hadn't fought a war.
Yeah, there was a comeback. The terrible 70s were sort of we had turned the corner from that, and he was starting his second term.
Yeah, and Grenada, and we had just left Lebanon. We had just Grenada was over when I enlisted. So it really, I was like, yeah, whatever.
Michael Jackson's Thriller, Van Halen's 1984 came out. It was an interesting time.
We were the
Rambo. Had Rambo come out yet? I think Rambo had just come out then too. Or First Blood.
And Rambo, and we were the George Orwell class. And and that was a very interesting time because when you're in school, you're sitting there thinking about stuff, and also Ohio, there wasn't this pressure to go to school to get a degree like there was, like
about 5-6 years later, back in the Clinton era, they really put the foot on the gas pedal for that.
So my dad, says, well, if you don't know what you do, I don't want you to, to do stupid stuff. And then our family had bars, and our family had the Brown Derby. I don't know if you remember that.
I know the Brown Derby. Yeah.
And then Coventry Steakhouse, and my uncle is Spiro Fontes, who had 16 East, had the Coventry Steakhouse, had a bunch of restaurants. And I'm like, I don't know. I know I don't want to go that way, so because I will rob old ladies at ATMs before I work in the restaurant business again. I mean that is just
that's a lifestyle, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle.
And so I thought the Marine Corps would be the best way to go, and it was a good decision. And I got to tell you something, which made my decision even better. And consider this is Black History Month. I got to tell you about a guy by the name of Lloyd Keyser. Lloyd Keyser was our assistant. He was our coach and helped out with the team. Lloyd Keyser is the first African-American medalist in the United States. He was the United States Marine Corps captain. So in 1976, he wrestles at the Montreal Olympics, wins a silver. So his roommate was my coach at Ohio State, Russ Helixson. So I go to his name is Butch Keyes, Lloyd Butch Keyes is what he goes by, and he goes, I said, hey, I have an option to go wrestle at Ohio State. Russ, has reached out to me and said, hey, we'd like to have an upper weight. would you come wrestle at Ohio State, or I could have stayed in the Marine Corps and wrestled. And Butch said, hey, Russ is a great guy, one of the best human beings ever. You will not regret it. And he said, if you want to go to school and wrestle, you will never replace that experience. And plus, you'll have a degree. So, 1988, I got a scholarship here, and that kind of turned things to come to Columbus. Plus, I like being home. Yeah, I like Columbus. I mean,
Columbus is a great place to live. I mean, there's been some changes in the last couple of years I'm not too happy with in Columbus, just seeing what's going on. But generally, it's like we seem to be generally immune from all the horrible stuff that happens around the country. It's like if it hits the country hard, it doesn't hit Columbus as hard. But the up times are always up. The down times never seem to be quite as down. And maybe it's because the government's here. You got the university here. Believe it or not, there's a lot of corporate entities here.
Wendy's,
fast food capital of the world, really. Yeah. I think more fast food chains started here in Columbus.
And now Intel, which who knows what that's going to look like.
Who knows? But Norm's not here to bitch about it.
I know exactly.
but so in 1988, you come into Ohio State. What's interesting to me is I usually do a World War II history fact of the day, which maybe there's a good segue into it. But there is I read a book by, I think it was Stephen Ambrose, who sort of pointed this out. All the veterans who came back and say 44, 45, and we're going to go to college. They came in, and that was back in the days, I guess, that there was hazing going on. So if you're a first year freshman, you wear the beanie, and they sort of make fun of you or whatever. And these veterans are like, no effing way. Like you guys had, like they had, the rest of us had zero understanding. By say us, civilians, particularly the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, had zero understanding what these guys had been, these men had been through at this point. We're talking like Anzio, which was happening right now in 1943, I think. You're talking about Stalingrad, or not Stalingrad, but we talked about not Anzio, the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah,
and, it's like these guys had come fresh off that stuff, and they go into college and they're going to get hazed by a bunch of geeks. It's like, so how did it feel coming back and looking at these younger kids?
I got to tell you this. So fall of '88, I start wrestling, and so we have a gentleman by the name of John Macco, who's our academic advisor, and he just recently retired, one of the greatest guys ever. So there was a rule that they had to have freshmen had to go to study table. Now, mind you, I had just got out of the Marine Corps in that summer. I go to study table, and it looks like I'm walking into Miss Barbara's,
grade school class or something.
Grade school, yeah. I mean, like Romper Room. Miss Barbara's from Romper Room.
Oh yeah.
So I go.
It took me a second. Good job.
Yeah,
great reference.
Okay, sure.
And so I walk in there, and I have like a slight 3-day beard, and I'm looking at somebody, and I mean they're kids.
Yeah.
And
zero life experience.
Zero life experience, and I'm like, oh, I am not doing this. So I went there for a week, and I said. And I went to John, and I said, and I argued with Jim Jordan at the time because he was our assistant. He was, running, part of the academic part. And I said, I am not showing up to study table. I'll kill one of these kids. I mean, seriously.
Right, because you're fresh off 4 years in the military, 4 years in the Marines, no less, right?
Yeah, and so I look at them, and I'm like, and I said, no, I am not doing this. By my senior year, I was the oldest student athlete at Ohio State. I was 26 years old. I turned 27 in March. I used to walk into classes, and like we'd go to Hitchcock or Campbell or somebody, where they'd have the incoming. They thought I was the TA. So you'd walk into class, and I'm like, no, I'm just.
Can you imagine like showing up at a wrestling meet and you've got this guy on the other side of you? It's like he's 25 years old.
Exactly.
He's ready to rock your world fresh out of the Marines.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain strength, I would presume, and I'll let you comment on this, George, but I would think there's a certain strength that you get from experiencing things like hard things, like whether it's the Marines, and then you couple that with like the bonding and the brotherhood and everything that goes with it. You sort of have a different viewpoint on life. And anybody who's ever been through something tough, even if it's like 2-a-days in football, when you get through that, you feel better. And I imagine that's like what you went through is like 50 or 100 times that. And you just have a certain outlook on the world that gives you a little bit more presence, strength, mental and physical.
You're comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's the whole thing.
What a great way to put it.
And that's the one thing. And I look at some of the experiences we had in the fleet. And one of the things, I'll give you a prime example. We were in Lancelin, Australia, doing what's called a CAX, a combined arms exercise with the Australian Army. It rained. It rained sideways. It rained forward. It rained backwards. And Australia rain is not like any other rain. But we were in the field at that point for like 7 days, and it just rained the whole time. And we were just miserable. But you looking back, we had some of the greatest times out there because we had fire missions and we were able to do some really cool stuff. You become used to being uncomfortable. And so, when you look at things like, I see people get upset because they go to Starbucks and the guy in front of you is like, my latte did not come out at 138 degrees with light foam.
Yeah, and you're looking at him like,
and I'm like looking at it, like, I had people that trying to kill me that were pretty trained at it, and they didn't. And the worst thing I have to worry about is getting a latte. Nah, I'm good.
It's like the Band of Brothers. This was in a book, and I think it made the series too, where there's these guys getting interviewed about being cold nowadays, and they just keep saying, well, at least it's not Bastogne. It's not. It's like, I've been through hell, and this is not it.
So we got a chance. So when I was in the Marine Corps, we got a chance to go to Iwo Jima, and go to Mount Suribachi. And you take a look, and then you take
now, is that like the Holy Grail in the Marines?
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty much. It's the Holy Grail of Holy Grails. And so at Iwo Jima, there's a thing is, uncommon valor was a common virtue. And you don't realize what it looks like until you actually get there. And the beach that they landed on, it was like 1,000 people getting into the courtyard outside. It was like, it was bodies on top of bodies, and they had, they threw them at the Japanese, and the Japanese had these tunnels that they had built all over the island. So guys had to, every time you shot one, another guy would pop up because they would pull in the bodies. And one of the things that the Marine did not know, the Marines at Iwo Jima did not know, is the Japanese were very good at extracting the bodies when they were dead. So you didn't know whether there was 100 guys in this pit or 200. But
almost demoralizing, right? You don't feel like you're making any headway.
Yeah, and they did the same thing in Korea when they in the Korean War, but they pulled them out. So they would have these guys that would go into tunnels, and there were 3-man teams, and they would chase down the Japanese. And so you look at this and you think about how many people were killed at Iwo Jima. And then you see Suribachi, which the picture of that they have at where Ira Hayes and all them, plant the flag. That was a staged flag. That was staged.
Interesting story behind that picture, but we won't go into it. But it's still representative of something significant.
Right. And so 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines was there, and they lost a lot of men. And one of the guys that was awarded the Silver Star, he started with 156 men in his company. When it was done, they were on the boat coming out of there. He said 19 men, all present and accounted for. He had lost 140 men out of his company, and there was 19 left. And then you look at it and you go, the Marines that were there, they really killed a lot of people. And so when you start looking at that, you're like, well, yeah, there's a lot of history that goes behind it, but it's also how they fought. They fought on top of each other. So the guy that you're going in combat with, you're shoulder to shoulder. You're not, 500 feet away. I mean, you're shoulder to shoulder. So, you're fighting with your buddy, you're fighting with the guy next to you, and it's pretty close. And so even today, when you think about it, I still have, I want to describe something. They're called 3 o'clock friends. You have, there's a podcast that just came out. They were talking about 3 o'clock friends that who would you call at 3 o'clock in the morning? I could call half my platoon and they will show up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Most people don't have that. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, how many friends do you have that will show up at 3 o'clock in the morning to move a body?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're a lawyer. I'm sorry. That's.
Well, I'm the guy they call
to move the couch.
I need help. To move the couch.
To clean the carpet. Right.
Yeah, I can neither confirm nor deny that I can.
Yeah.
And so, you're in battle with these guys, and then so there's nothing that bonds you closer than combat or serving together, or the fact that you have to trust this person with your life.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why the Marine Corps is a cult. And
is that true more so, you think, than like the Army or the Navy or the Air Force?
Yeah, because nobody says I almost joined the Navy. I mean, anybody says, I almost joined the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps is a cult because it's the smallest service. It's usually, with the exception of a couple times, it averages about 180,000 men and women.
Yep.
So there's fewer Marines. Parris Island graduates 7,000 recruits a year. San Diego recruits about the same. And then you have Quantico that graduates the Marine officers. So there's not that many Marines coming in every year.
And I still see this happening. Guys that say I'm a friend with somebody who's a former Marine, and then he encounters, I introduce him to somebody else, or he just meets somebody else I'm around. They'll just look at each other and say Semper Fi. Or what? Like there's a brotherhood that exists, and they don't even know each other. Yeah,
it is. It's a brotherhood and the Marine Corps instills that, because one of the things that they, the Marine Corps is different because when you go to boot camp. And they've had this discussion why a Marine's different. They work on you being a Marine first, then doing everything else. Where the Army, if you go to boot camp, they start teaching you how to shoot, how to march, how to do certain things, and there's not the same camaraderie. There's not the same bond. In the Marine Corps, the first thing is you're going to be a Marine. And when they were talking about bonuses, and getting people to recruit. Right now, the only service that is not the Marine Corps is filling their recruitment tool, because the assistant commandant said, "You know what your bonus is for joining the Marine Corps? You get to claim the title of being a Marine."
Well, isn't that an interesting psychological metaphor? It's like you can promise people trinkets, you can promise people whatever, but maybe the human soul is really looking for some sort of connection instead. It's like the external crap that is promised isn't as significant to people, maybe even subconsciously, as like this notion, I'm going to be part of something bigger than me.
And think about that. I mean, you look at the fraternities on college. I mean, and I'm not comparing the two, but look at the guys that are in Sigma Chi.
Well, isn't it? But didn't fraternities in large part were military? Like they were sort of mimicking that experience, create a brotherhood, create this bond, and obviously it's not the same, but it's a parallel.
But you have the the Omega Psi Phis, you have the Kappas, and they come, they come together, and it's a connection, and it's a common bond. And one of the things that the Marine Corps strives to do, and sometimes they're good at it and sometimes they're not, but it's the training is the same regardless of where you go.
Yeah.
Where the Army is not necessarily the same. You have what's called a one-station unit training. So if you're a tanker, you go to a boot camp at Fort Knox, and you stay from boot camp all the way through to your A school. In the Marine Corps, you graduate boot camp, then you go to Marine Corps combat training, and then you go to your MOS school. So you're trained to be a combat Marine, a combat Marine first, then your job is second. One of the other things is I've ran into general officers and they don't care. You call them Marine. You're not, fine. You might, they might be a general, but you said, it's a title. So the commandant of the Marine Corps doesn't care that you call them a Marine. Where you call a general in the Army a soldier, you don't know what their response is going to be.
And isn't the Marines a little bit? I don't know why I've heard. I could be wrong. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, my understanding of the Marines is like, and maybe it's dovetailing with what you're saying. It's like you have this. Everybody learns how to be a Marine first, and then isn't there in the sort of the goal to teach people all up and down the vertical ladder, like you can do the next guy's job and the next guy can do your job. And I don't think the other services are like that necessarily.
And that's one of the reasons why the retention levels in combat for the Marine Corps are the highest ever. So if more people re-enlist in combat with the Marine Corps than at garrison.
Well, that makes sense. If you have 180,000 Marines, they have to be interchangeable.
Yeah. Well,
you have to know each other's job.
And doesn't it just make perfect sense? So it's like if you're going to have an efficient fighting force, Like we do that. I do that at my office.
Right.
I make I'm the lawyer, but I know how to do this guy's job, all the people's jobs. I can run the building. I can manage that. Or if I needed to, I can do some of the clerical. It's like you have to. That's the only way to be efficient. If you lost somebody.
Right.
Well, you take a look. I'll give you a prime example. You're familiar with Baker and Hostetler, right?
Yep.
So
the law firm.
Yeah, the law firm.
It's a national law firm. Right.
So one of my dear friends is a guy by the name of Mike Holman, who went to the Naval Academy. They lost one of the guys that they lost was their filing lawyer, the guy that filed the briefs, and he knew everything. Now, he had an ankle monitor on him that if he ever came close to a courtroom, they would tackle him and, drag.
You're not allowed to argue in court.
You're not allowed to argue. But he filed, for lawsuits and class actions, he would file the briefs. He left. It took them almost 9 months to replace him. Nine months, because this guy knew everything. He knew that, just to give you, a little simple thing, when you filed an appeal, you cannot file it both sides. They had to be on one side of paper.
Sure. Yeah.
And something as simple as that, in the Marine Corps, they teach you, now obviously you can't take a grunt and make him a pilot, but if a pilot gets on the ground, he knows actually.
Well, that's what I mean. You learn to be a Marine first. You can fight first. You can be in this brotherhood first. Well, it's interesting. There's how much there's a perception that I have that of inefficiency and what inefficiency is. Like if you can only do your job and you're not trained to figure out how to do his job or do his job particularly, but I think more importantly what I'm saying is figure it out. There's this idea that we have to be able to solve problems if we're going to function in the world. And this is lawyer training. People's like, what's it like to be a lawyer? Well, I don't know the law, but I know how to learn it, and I can go figure it out. And now I figure after I've gone to law school, I can figure out almost anything. And as my dad used to say, look, as a lawyer, you can do almost everything that any other profession can do. Not as well, of course, but you can do it. But they can't do what you do because we've sort of gotten this education to learn how to solve problems. And, it seems to me that if you're going to create a fighting force that has that instilled, like I can figure out your job because I've got a little bit of training on it, sort of the all-rounder back in the Greek Olympics. That was like celebrated. And I don't feel that way instinctively with the other branches of the service.
And they're not. I mean, the Air Force is, a critical branch because they have nuclear weapons. They have pilots, and their mission is to keep birds in the air. That's their mission. So you have the pilots and then everything else. So and they're not mission oriented. They're constantly doing something, but it's to support the pilots. So either you're a pilot or you're not, and basically we call the Marine Corps refers to them as CrossFit with nukes. So.
That's awesome.
and so, the Army is, it's in the same way. The Army does, they teach you your job. And then if you leave your job, it's going to be harder for you to integrate, do a lateral transfer. The other thing is that the Army also has they're the largest logistical force on the planet. The U.S. Army is. If you think about the Army Corps of Engineers, I can't remember the exact. I think it's the 337th Logistics Command down in New Orleans. They, if they have a FEMA event, their job is to bring in logistics, to bring in everything that they need. So that's handled by them. The DLA, the Defense Logistics Agency, that's most of it is Army moved. So their job is, especially is yes, you need to accomplish a mission. Do they have war fighters? Yes. I mean, they have some of the greatest, 75th Ranger Battalion, 101st, 82nd. They have
the classics,
the classics. They have special forces, and they have some great tier 1 units, and they are great war fighters. But they don't have as many combat troops compared to the support troops. So that's, the Marine Corps has a higher percentage of combat troops as support as comparison to their support troops.
Gotcha. Well, look, I'd love to sit here and I could talk about this stuff all day, but I do want to cover some stuff about what you're doing now, because you have this Vet Radio Syndicate. Yeah. Obviously, you're a vet. That's what we've been talking about. But tell us about that, how you got into it, and what it's all about.
So, Vet Radio Syndicate started we started out as Warfighter Radio, and it started in 2016. And one of the things that happened is veterans didn't have a voice online. So when we first started, we had the guy that started it started bringing vets on air to tell their message. We used to broadcast, not on Facebook, but we broadcast on. We used Spreaker, we used OBX, and then we had weekly shows, and we had about one time we had about 30 hosts. But basically, what we did was help veterans start a podcast or start a show, get their message out, and also number two, which is kind of more important, is to get veterans connected with groups that they needed. So we would, we had 22 Till None, Mission 22. If we had a veteran in crisis, we had support teams that would reach out to them and help them out. We had, and we still do. But basically is we want to give veterans, if there's something that's going on with a veteran, we want to get them help because a lot of them are falling through the cracks. So what we basically built is a platform to get veterans online to tell their story, to tell, what's going on, and also to have, some lighthearted comedy that is, entertainment, because sometimes, just being able to get on the air and make fun of,
anything, right?
Anything,
yeah.
And it's
what a fascinating. I mean, it sort of just clicked on me what you're doing. You create a platform, and it's not like there's one show that you've got a certain direction and a cause and a message that you're putting out there, but you open it up to all veterans to be able to have a voice and talk about whatever they want to talk about. But it's like this subtle goal next to that is those who need that kind of camaraderie or connection can get it, and then those who need help then have like a structure in place with others who are already there to get the help they need. So it's like it's almost, I don't want to say one's primary and one's secondary, but those goals, it seems like, are working hand in glove.
Yeah, and so one of the groups we deal with is 22 Till None. And one of the things that happens is the VA has some help, but sometimes in certain places they lack support systems. So for example, I'll give you an example of something we do. We help female veterans that are in crisis. So that are, and one of the things that happens if if they had to deal with domestic violence, we have ways of getting them out of that situation, putting them up in a safe harbor. And so that's one of the things that we do. We have a program where we buy groceries for veterans that just need, that are short on, short on funds. Sometimes, they, I'll give you an example. We have, even if you're 100% disabled from the VA, sometimes, and you have, you're missing a leg or something like that, they're not as supportive as you think they are, so you have to come out of pocket. And so sometimes they run, they need their gas bill paid, or they need some groceries, or they need their, something paid. We have 22 Till None deals with that. That's one of the groups that we partner with. We have other groups like Irreverent Warriors that we deal with, that they have marches. They go have a march, 5K walk, but it gets a bunch of veterans together. We have another group that they have a race team. They go out and they go watch the races. We have a group that does fishing and goes outdoors, and so we get veterans to get into that, to go out and fish. So the reason for that is that they're dealing with other veterans, which helps because veterans speak their own language, and that is the first thing. Number two is that if they need to talk, they have a mechanism there where they're around other people that they can talk about. And one of the things that happens at that point is if they're able to talk about what's going on, it seems to calm them down, because then the guy next to you is saying, hey, listen, I've been through that. It's like the old thing, the guy in the hole that drops a quarter in the hole, the guy throws a 20 down there and he says, well, now we're both stuck. Mm-hmm. And he says, yeah, but I know the way out.
Yeah. And
so when you have something like that, people have a tendency to go, okay, they'll open up to a veteran. And one of the things that the VA has done, and it's helped, is roundtable therapy. And that, where you get, 10, 15 guys in a room, females also. I mean, it's not, and they just say, hey, listen, what's going on? Not all veterans, work with that. Sometimes you need a one-on-one. Sometimes you just need to, I had a battle in distress. We call them battle in distress. A few years ago, I had to literally every 3 days a week, I had to go to deal with this, this veteran, and he was really one of the worst cases I've ever seen until we got him some help. But 3 times a week, I would take him Amy's Donuts, and we would just have a cup of coffee and and sit on the couch, and and it would just be an hour of, sometimes we didn't even talk, but the fact that he had somebody there that was supportive and
and that he could trust.
Right.
Because he feels like, look, we've got some connection here that goes back, that sort of transcends everybody else. Like I can trust this guy. It's an interesting thought. I mean, look, it's not complicated psychology. If you're going to go punish somebody in prison, what do? You put them in solitary confinement. And if you take that sort of model and you say, look, how do we make a veteran miserable in his own experiences? Well, give him nobody to talk to and make him just sit there and act like nothing's wrong. And it's like when those secrets are still within you, then they eat you alive. As soon as you tell somebody, it's like it sort of goes away. It sort of like relieves the pressure. And I don't presume to understand the psychology of what these guys go through, but I think that's sort of what you're getting at. You give these guys an organic way to interact with others. And what we have found at this table, we call it the round table, what we have found here is that we all feel better when we sit and talk like this about anything. It doesn't have to be what we're sad about. Anything. We always feel better.
So there's a study that came out about what you're talking about, the round table. People that engage in this kind of conversation to get mental help and you get therapy have about a 60% success rate. Add one more to it. Whatever add one more therapy measure, whatever it is, they get to about 90%.
Wow.
And it's probably true. I'm saying probably because I don't presume to know again, but it's probably true that to get that one more therapy measure, you almost have to start like this.
Yeah.
Because then nobody's going to just jump to that. It's got to be like this movement, like, oh, you're doing that too. Okay, I feel a little more comfortable doing this, so I'll go to do this. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, you've got that one more thing, whatever it is.
Whatever it is, and they, from cognitive, from cognitive therapy to any of the therapy measures that are accepted by LSWs, MSSWs, whatever that is. If you get any individual 2 therapy measures, they have about a 90% success rate, and that's what we try to focus on. So there's different programs that one of the things we worked on is we tell veterans about Veteran Stand Down. They had it at the convention center. So Veteran Stand Down is that they have every government agency that has care for veterans. The hardest thing about veterans right now is there's more alcoholism than any other whatever you want to call it.
Any other drug. There's more people addicted to alcohol. Look, in my line of work representing people charged with crimes, if you got rid of alcohol and did not replace it with something similar, you would eliminate most crime.
And so they have Mount Carmel, and wasn't familiar with this, but Mount Carmel has a program for veterans for alcohol. Ohio State has a program for veterans that have been hurt in, not just in combat, but in, that have been hurt, they have basically a wounded veteran care. So all of those groups came together, and they have these things called Veteran Stand Down. Well, a lot of the veterans that showed up did not know that. Because a lot of the times one of the things is everybody wants to help vets. That's great. But where do you start? Mm-hmm. And so Franklin County does a great job. I've met with Mayor Ginther and his staff, and, they hire veterans. They get help for veterans, and they get mental help for veterans. And sometimes just sitting down with a group of veterans and just bitching helps out tremendously. Then they have next level care where if you need, some, chemical therapy, you need to get on whatever the, antidepressants or something, they will give you that. So does the VA. But
well, hold on, you just brought up VA for the first time. Like I think one other time you mentioned VA, but all this stuff you've talked about, you got the Vet Radio Syndicate that sort of brings people together and helps people sort of take that first step into the first discussion and then maybe the second discussion. And then all at the same time, it's providing content for veterans on the radio. Where does the VA fit into that? That's all outside VA, right? You're not doing that.
Right.
The VA's not sponsored you. And
no, they have not. And the problem, one of the problems with the VA has been, and I'll give you something you might have not thought. 1990, there was 31,685,000 veterans.
Okay, 1990. All right.
1990. As of this year, as of 2024, we are down to 16,970,000 veterans. We have lost almost 14 million veterans have died since 1990. The veteran population is getting older. We're going to see in our lifetime, we're going to see the last World War II veteran die. Mm-hmm. And so one of the problems is that the VA, as veterans have aged, they have to give better care to those veterans. Number two,
right? So now they're dealing with things like hearing loss and things like the physical stuff,
like we're doing with the society following the boomers kind of feel.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, that's a good parallel.
Kind of.
And so in World War II, it was 11.2% of the population served was under arms. Everybody served. And so in one way of another, I'll give you a prime example. The greatest baseball player of all time, Ted Williams. Served, he was a Marine, served in World War II, served in Korea. He was John Glenn's wingman. And one of the best stories ever. They were out on a mission, and Ted Williams has 2016 vision, and he goes to John Glenn, hey, there's two MiGs at 3:00. John Glenn goes, I don't see them. He goes, they're there, and they turn and engage them, and John Glenn finally sees them. And he says, when I had Ted Williams with me, he says I was not scared of anything because no one was going to sneak up on us.
He had 2016 vision.
2016.
No wonder. I mean, he was an incredible hitter. So it's like you wonder how that correlates.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a dive we don't need to take.
And so when you talk about Joe DiMaggio served, everybody served during World War II. Ronald Reagan served. Every president we had from from Eisenhower on, from Harry S. Truman to Bill Clinton was in the military. Every single one of them were World War II vets. The Bill Clinton was the first non-veteran to be in the White House since FDR.
Interesting.
I thought of it that way.
Interesting.
Well,
yeah,
you go down. Eisenhower was a World War II vet with the Army. JFK was with the Navy. Richard Nixon was with the Navy. LBJ was with the Navy. Jimmy Carter was with the Navy.
Ford
was, I think, he was in the Army or the Navy. Then you had Reagan, which was with the Army Air Corps, and then you had Bush, who was a fighter pilot.
Yeah. In World War II.
And so the first non-veteran that we had in the White House was Bill Clinton for a long time.
It's an interesting.
He was the first baby boomer.
There's some conclusions we could probably draw from that I won't. I got to give that some thought. But that's an interesting factoid. Mm-hmm. So look, the VA is sort of doing its thing, and you're doing your thing. I mean, is there ever any interaction?
Yeah, we interact with the VA, and there are some things that the VA has done better. One of the reasons the VA is really good at providing health care. The problem is, and this is something that I've seen and our group has seen, is they're not good at telling what's available. So if you go show up at the VA and you're hurt, you broke your arm, they will treat you. You're a veteran, they will treat you. If you have, if you show up and you have, you need whatever you need healthcare wise, they will treat you. They have some programs though that most veterans aren't aware of, and they don't tell you that. So unless you have what's called a VSO, a Veteran Service Officer, they don't tell you that, hey, this program is available. So one of the things that it's kind of hard to explain, but you can have a disability rating and not be treated at the VA. And you can be treated at the VA without having a disability rating. So one of the things that happens is that there's guys out there that just need, blood pressure pills. Well, you can go to the VA and they'll give them to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's funny. My dad did that for the first, he's never gone to the VA his entire life. And then now he's 90 or almost 90. And he's and somehow he connected with the VA for hearing loss. Mm-hmm. From being in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And he could have gone there for everything. I mean, he was worried about his own health care. He's always bought his own stuff. He never really even thought about it.
And so those programs are always available, but it's the problem is that, let's say you're not in a major metropolitan area. So Columbus has one of the best VAs out there.
They sent him to Toledo, I think, by the way.
Yeah. And if you
doesn't make much sense, but that's what they did.
Well, and if you have a heart problem, they're going to send you to Cleveland and the Cleveland Clinic, and they're going to get you treated there. So the VA has great programs. A lot of veterans don't know about them.
Well, let me ask you a different question, though. And I'll tell you a story, and then I'll ask the question. I had a client who was accused of drunk driving, and it was his second offense. He was a Marine Corps veteran. And the judge, I'm not going to say the jurisdiction, it was not Columbus, wanted me to have this client evaluated and look for alcohol, substance abuse type treatment. And the judge was sort of pushing me to have him go to the VA and do that. I mentioned that to my client, and I got some eye rolling and yeah, whatever. I mean, not because he didn't want to do the evaluation, but because he didn't trust it necessarily. He thought, what a pain in the ass this is going to be. I don't want to go mess with that. He goes, do you have anybody else I can use, a private guy? And I do. I mean, I got a guy, you give him it's a text away and he's working with you. So what's the perception of veterans for services that the VA provides? I guess that's what I'm asking in a long-winded way.
It depends on the area. Columbus has, again, I'm speaking for Columbus, they have a great VA. Philadelphia, not as much. One of the problems that happened is one of the veterans in Philadelphia killed himself in the parking lot. Phoenix had a huge problem. So depending on the area that you were in, depended on the level of care. So each state is different. Now, you would think that the VA across every system would be the same, and it's not. So if you go back to, you have to take a look at the level of health care that the state provides, because the part of the VA funding comes from state Medicaid. So that come. So
okay, so it's tied to funding to some degree.
And so now the VA, in the last 10 years especially, has done a better job, because we have too many veterans that have killed themselves, committed suicide, and they said we can't get help. Well, now they've done that. So one of the things that they've done at the VA here, and they've done it in other places, like I'll give you an example. They've done it in Atlanta. They have what's called intake care. So if you're at risk and you need help, they will bring you in. They will get you. It's like if you're having a mental breakdown, they'll get you in and bring you in there and keep you there. And it works. Charlotte is the same way. Charlotte has very good care. Toledo has very good care. So it depends on the area, and it also depends on what you need exactly. But some VAs are overloaded because, we have Dallas has a good VA system, but you have a lot of veterans that are in Dallas. You have Oklahoma City has a lot, there's a lot of veterans that they care. So in places where you have a lot of veterans, you're always going to have a lot of, you're going to be overwhelmed, and they do the best that they can. The Bronx has a VA hospital, and they're doing very good. But in some places, because anytime you have a bureaucracy, you're going to have issues. So veterans are like, I'd rather not go. And the problem then happens is one veteran tells another veteran, tells another veteran, tells another veteran, and then all of a sudden, you have that groundswell. So one of the things that we've done at VRS is that we've tried to get people into certain programs.
Vet Radio Syndicate, VRS.
Yeah, Vet Radio. We try to get people say, hey, listen, if you are having frontal lobe dysplasia, you're having a TBI, let's get you to some care that we can get you for that.
And you can maybe sort of, like you call it, a groundswell, which is really like this. It becomes, the negative attitude just sort of becomes addicting or an epidemic. So you can help break through it and say, look, no, we trust us. We know this. They can help you over here. Or here's what it is, and maybe ease people into some care.
So one of the people that we have on staff, or as an advisor, is we have a doctor at the University of Missouri that handles TBIs. So if we have a vet,
a traumatic brain injury,
and those are the worst situations to deal with, because you have frontal lobe dysplasia. They're not, there's 14 different things that happen. We call him, and he's a doctor there, and we go, hey, I've got this veteran. He's down in Savannah, Georgia. Where do we need to get him to get some help? Because if he doesn't get help, he's going to get worse, but then he becomes, he might commit suicide or something like that. So he deals with a lot of, neurological centers, and we have had some really good support with them. One of the things that, that we've also have is there's some other groups that have started dealing with microdosing of mushrooms. And that has helped a lot of they've been proven to give repair. There's a program out in Colorado where they take veterans and they give them peyote, and they wind up doing the Indian tent ceremony.
Yep.
And that has helped vet. And not every veteran is going to have, there's different versions of PTSD. You can have a shock trauma, you can have attachment trauma, you can have from TBI, you can have from, basically survivor's guilt. So every veteran is different. And people outside of the VA says, oh, all you need is a night out in town and you'll be better. Oh yeah, we didn't think of that.
Right.
Right. And you saying that, okay, so I need to ask you this, and this has been burning in my mind. But you're changing my mind about this a little bit. Why can't we get our shit together as a country and support our vets and via VA? But I'm also rethinking that now. Maybe we better not. Maybe this is better. That what we're setting up here. I know it's a trickle effect. And they're trying to reduce those number of vets dying every day, taking their own lives and such. But putting money in the VA may not necessarily be the answer. It's more of what you're doing. And
I don't want to take anything away from the VA.
And I'm not trying to either. No. It's throwing money at the government. That's what I don't.
The problem is when the government tries to fix a problem of this broad spectrum, it can't do it. It can't do it for political reasons. It can't do it for financial reasons. It can't do it because it doesn't know how to do it.
But I feel as a country we're obligated to help these men and women out though somehow.
But isn't this a parallel to what's going on in the country? It's like before we looked at the government to take care of everybody, like with its social safety net. The local people did it. People like you, George, did it. People like the church on the corner would help take care of the people who were struggling that week to get their groceries. And they did it so much more efficiently than the government could ever do it because they didn't have to employ 50 or 1 million people down a bureaucracy to get it done. Now, the VA I think what you're saying is the VA has its benefits, but it needs to be supplemented by what you're doing.
And so one of the things I'll give you back. In the 1950s, who do you think had the largest job program in the United States?
I don't know.
When I tell you, you're going to be surprised. The Catholic Church.
Really? Okay.
The Catholic Church in the 1950s had a job program that you go to the local diocese and they would find you a job, because guess who was connected to it? The unions.
Okay.
And they also had they operated kitchens or, whatever, grocery.
Yeah.
And part of it goes back to is that if you went to the church and, you were getting groceries or help, then what they would do is that, they would say to you, if I'm bringing you food, I'm keeping you a little bit accountable. But when you're getting an EBT card from the government, there's no accountability there. So, now there's.
Well, I mean, it's like the AA model, right? It's like you don't, you can't just say I'm in AA and go into the ether. Like they have local groups that talk about things, and like that accountability component that you're talking about, George, makes all the sense in the world to me.
Okay.
And you're just adding more spice to what I already believe, which is when the government replaced the church. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about like the local. I won't even say church. I'll say with the local support structure is gone because it doesn't. People perceive it doesn't need to be there. And what you are doing is rebuilding that in some way, and helping people find the government resources that are there, but not only helping them find them, helping them know that they need to.
Yeah. And so I'll give you an example, not to, in politics, but if you go to Scandinavian countries, they're the least charitable countries out there. And one of the reasons is because they pay a high tax, and if they have a problem with something, they expect the government to take care of it. So here, what we say to, to the veterans, we need help. Like one of the things we help is Gold Star mothers or parents. And one of our spokespeople's lady by the name of Tracy Laporte, she helps Gold Star moms. I cannot begin to have any input on I've lost friends in combat, and that's great. But a Gold Star mom is somebody that's lost a child in combat.
Can you imagine? I can't imagine.
Right.
Yeah. And so what we do is we have a support system that, Tracy Laporte is, we get people to her because they have a support network that says, hey, you're going to be dealing with this. Let me get you to a parent, or we have another group. It's called Minus 22 that helps suicide survivors. I don't even know if they have had a spouse or a family member commit suicide, they help them, and they get, because that takes a completely different set of dynamics. So the problem we have had is, going with the VA, we went from treating Vietnam veterans and World War II veterans, which was what the VA's mission had been for the longest time, to now having an aging population and having, basically non-linear combat. Now that you're treating people that, 1990 or the war in Desert Storm was the last conventional war the planet ever had. So we will never see anything like that again, ever. So we now are dealing with asymmetrical warfare, and you're having different things happen that you have to deal with. So, anytime you have a big system like the VA, I mean, it's the third, I got to look this up, but I think it's the third or fourth largest expenditure that our government does.
Yeah, and like anything the government does, it has some good and it has some bad, and it has some corruption and it has some inefficiencies. I mean, none of it is going to work, I don't think, as well as the 3 o'clock or your 3 a.m. guy. Like you're not going to go to the VA at 3 a.m. or even think to call the VA at 3 a.m., but you're going to call your buddy who's going to come over and put his arm around you and say, hey, let's put on a movie and just hang out here.
Yeah, we have, and that's what we have. We have a battle and distress program that if we need somebody, we will get to you.
Yeah, and it's somebody who understands. It's not a bureaucrat,
right? And we also, there's a new program now with law enforcement that. We have a thing with law enforcement that they will send crisis officers that are veterans.
Awesome.
Because the last thing you want to do is you don't want to engage a veteran that's, combat trained that you don't want to send, because
you want somebody who understands the psychology and what's going on.
And
so, well, that sort of that shifts us over to another topic I wanted to cover. And then I think we're probably getting to the point where we got maybe one or two things, but, you and I have a mutual friend. He's a prosecutor, and you I don't know if you mentioned it here today, but we've talked about it before. And there's this thing that I'm seeing emerge all around the justice system. It's called Veterans Court.
Right.
And, I don't even understand it completely, but, I just want to get your thoughts on, tell us what Veterans Court is from your perspective, its effectiveness, because I see a lot of veterans with alcohol issues. But when I say I see them, I represent people charged with crimes. And when people call me, it's usually not their best day and they need my help. There's a lot of veterans who need my help, and they don't even know that. I can sort of see the psychology of it. Maybe it's a domestic violence, maybe it's substance abuse, whatever, or maybe it's completely unrelated and they're just veterans. And then we get to court and somebody will say, oh, this is a good candidate for Veterans Court. So take it from there, George. What's that all about?
So when Mike, they've started Veterans Court across the U.S.
Our friend Mike, yeah.
And so one of the things they've started here in Columbus, and it's been pretty effective. One of the things that happens is that when you go to court, you're dealing with some issues that you might have dependency issues, and that happens. And then the other thing is do you want to put a veteran in general population, or send him to prison for something that they could have been treated easier if he had gotten treatment beforehand. Mm-hmm. And that's a question that arises all the time. Is like, well, wait a second, what caused him to get here? And
is the government somehow part and parcel? I don't want to say responsible, but look, if somebody served the country and advanced our general interest, and that caused this problem that got him there, that's different than somebody might even have the same kind of problem that didn't happen as a result of serving the greater population.
Yeah.
I think that is different.
And it is. And then the problem is that people, here's the thing, that usually what you don't have in Veterans Court or in veterans, you're not going to have sexual assault crimes. You're not going to have a veteran. If they do that, then fry them. Whatever. But they're going to have issues of bad judgment,
anger management issues. I've seen people get drunk and they got anger issues and they explode and something happens, a bar fight, a spousal abuse, that kind of thing. And
so we can forgive stupidity. We can't forgive evil. That's the whole thing. And I'll give you an example of this. I was in the short north at a bar, and I have a couple friends of mine that are police officers, and one of them is a police officer that was my corpsman, and we have a pact. And this is here in Columbus. If we call you, if we are drunk, and you need help, we don't care. We will come get you. And so I called my buddy, who's a Columbus police officer, and I said, "Hey, you need to come get me. I'm at this bar, because if you don't get me now, you're gonna have the coroner here in about another hour or so, because And so he sent a cruiser to come get me, and that because we've been drinking and we had a couple of whatever I call them, the Chads down there.
Yeah,
and so I made one phone call and I said, hey, hey, Sergeant, yeah, you need to come get me. He sent a cruiser to get me out of there because it was going to turn bad. The last thing you want to do is put people in a situation where there's no outs.
So what is it? So help me out here, because that's an interesting scenario you've described. You had the wherewithal to say, look, I recognize the triggers that are right in front of me, and I know that this is about to go to a place that's not good for me. I've got this resource. I'm going to use it. It's like, what intervention, how do we get to that? How do we get people to that spot where they recognize it and do it?
You have to tell them that it's available. You have to tell the people that this is available. And this is one of the things we focus on is making sure that veterans have a place to talk, to vent, if nothing else. I mean, we have one of the things we do here in Columbus is we have a thing called Coffee with Coaches. So about once a month, there's about 10 veterans that get together, and we have coffee, and we just bitch, and we talk about everything but combat. You're not allowed to talk in it. You're not allowed to bring up combat. You cannot, you talk about things that are concerning you. Hey, I'm having troubles over here, or nothing else. We just talk about everything but combat. And the reason is that you don't want to once you start talking about combat, it starts forcing people down a dark hole.
Right.
And then so what we do is
there's a place for that, but not then. Right.
Not then.
Right.
So we sit there and talk about, we talk about Ohio State football. We talk about training. We talk about, here's, we have a thing that about repurposing your life, all those things. But we get it. We make sure that you have a place to vent, or at least to talk about things that, concern you, like, hey, how's my diet going? How's my training going? Hey, this is, something that we could use to make sure you have, joint dexterity, things like that. And it gives people a place to
what's amazing, moving forward versus backwards.
You're giving people alternatives. It's like, what's interesting is it's sort of collateral, but it's not. You're like, all right, so we're going to get on the radio and we're just going to start talking about vets. But because of that, we're going to get more vets to listen to us, and we're going to engage in more vets. And because they're engaged with us and we're vets too, we're going to understand their problems. And then maybe they're going to feel comfortable asking us for help for their problems. And we can organically funnel them into all these different places. And what you're talking about here is sort of the same. You're like, look, we're not going to go talk about combat. We know that's really what's screwing us all up, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about our workout regimen or this or something else. And then in the organic context of that, people start to come out of the darkness a little bit and get the help they want. It's a fascinating. I'm not a psychologist, but this is fascinating. And you guys have stumbled on it, I think, without even recognizing how deep it really is. And
one of the things that we have is that we have a weekly check on your buddy. I'll give you a funny.
God, I wish I had that guy.
Yeah. I got my dog.
And I'll give you an example. So I have a friend of mine from, that was my roommate. I sent him a text one day, right? And I said, hey, just want to tell you I love you. 3 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's his wife. And she's like, who the hell is this?
Oh no.
And she goes, I said, this is George. And she goes, what is wrong with you? And she goes, why are you sending my husband text and saying,
I love you, brother?
And I said, hey, listen, I've taken naked showers with your husband before you ever did.
That's awesome.
And so those are little things that during the day that, we say to people, hey, reach out to your buddy. Even if somebody just, say, hey, I'm thinking about you. Hey, are you okay?
Well, and I think, for whatever it's worth, as a non-veteran looking in at this, these are not things that aren't important in every other area too, outside the veterans organizations. Like, look, if everybody did this, if everybody would say, look, I know a guy I went to college with, or I went to high school with, or I used to be childhood friends with who's struggling, and you just thought, I'm going to reach out to that guy and just check in on him. That's happened to me a couple times. I went through some hard times, and people would text me, hey man, what's going on? You cool? Let's get breakfast tomorrow, or what's okay? And just hearing it sometimes makes all the difference. But how many people actually think about doing it?
I didn't really practice this during the COVID era, but you heard a lot of people doing that, checking in during COVID because of older adults that just didn't get out because they were afraid to go out. So they had people checking in on them. I think it's great.
And the other thing is that we have a stigma in the male community because, men commit suicide at a higher level because, we grew up at a time, hey,
we're more successful at it. Yeah. I think women might attempt more, but they don't succeed. Men succeed almost every time they try.
Right. And you go, hey, you drank, and if the answer was at the bottom of the bottle, you'd have the answer at the first bottle. And
that's a good point.
But one of the things is that when's the last time you just sat down with one of your buddies and just talk? And one of the things that happens, and this is outside of the veteran community, but it happens when men use code words, and we have a problem with deciphering those. So if you have one of your male friends says to you, I'm tired,
and
I had a couple of friends of mine said, I checked with them. I said, what kind of tired are you? Are you physically tired or are you emotionally tired? Because if you are emotionally tired, hey, let's talk about this because that, and so, men use, I'm not going to say subtlety, but they're not going to just come out and say, hey man, I'm having a really tough time right now. I need somebody to talk to. And, and as we age, sometimes, one of the things that it seems to be is that if you don't have a good friend, it's hard to be vulnerable because you have to trust that other person with your feelings. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have a safe space, a safe harbor, somewhere you can say, hey man, I'm having a hard time with this. What, I need to vent, what's the next step? Because you take a look at people that, you take a look at Anthony Bourdain, Robin Williams, and people that you think are successful. And there's even, there's I don't know how to say this. There are people that have looked at the Heath Ledger death, and they said that was more of a suicide than he overdosed because he was in a dark place. And so that, where we think that people overdose, is it an overdose by accident? Is there an overdose on purpose to, commit suicide?
Or a reckless one, like I don't give a crap either way.
Right.
Right.
And
which is really the second. Right.
So if you don't have a safe space to be vulnerable at, what happens then? You keep all your feelings inside and you just say one day, you're like, hey, screw it. I'm done. I'm going to check out.
Well, I've said this many times. It's really, really lonely to be a strong man because you don't have those out. Like we don't get to go complain to people. We don't get to go talk to people and bitch about so and so and this and that and the other. It's like, look, you throw the load on your back and you march on. That's what we do, and that's it's not weak to do what you're talking about doing. It's actually very healthy and enables you to it enables me when I talk to my buddies to actually take on more responsibility and be better at being a man, generally speaking. So, I think everybody needs a dose of that sometimes.
And, you think about it. I mean, if you, and I'm not pushing religion because that's the last thing. But when we were more church going, you had fellowship. You had a fellowship, you could go talk to your priest, your pastor, you had elders that you could go to, you had the deacons, you had, and now we've taken, not just with social media, but with lifestyle, we've taken that away from people.
And not only that, it's been replaced with like really bad stuff. Like here, buy more things, get a bigger house, go keep up with the Joneses. And no, I'm with you 100%.
And even to your point, maybe even the church community is not necessarily the deacons and the priests and the preachers. It's the people you're sitting with in pews.
Right.
That's your community. That's your support.
You realize that you're not unlike everybody else, right, and you have a support structure.
It's the after church donuts and coffee, and you're talking.
Right,
nothing else that's disappearing.
And that's why we did why we do the coffee with coaches. Yeah. We get together with to say, hey, we're going to have coffee and donuts. And by the way, the Snow and Fox up at Easton, in New Albany, they got the best cinnamon rolls in Columbus.
Oh, really?
I mean, okay. I would look. I know this is bad, but I would kick a toddler over the wall for them. I mean, those things are like they're better than Cece's cinnamon rolls.
Oh my gosh!
So
well, look, a couple things just to wrap it up. Are you guys a 501c3? Do you have a?
Yeah, we have.
So what do people do if they're going to look you up? If they're going to find more about what you're doing, or if they even want to donate to your cause? How do you do it?
We're on Facebook. We're at Vet Radio Syndicate. We're on Facebook, and then we have our website is vetrs.com. You can look up there. If you the one thing that, like I said, if you want to support a vet, or reach out to us and we'll put you in contact. We've had like 15 different nonprofits we deal with, and just say, hey, this is the most thing that we say about if you are going to if you want to help veterans, be an American worth fighting for. Just be a better person.
What do you guys think? Now I got to ask. So thank you for your service. I see some soldiers or servicemen in a restaurant. And I pay their tab. Like what do you guys think of that?
I think it's great awareness, because people that grew up in the 80s and served in there, we had an era with the Vietnam veterans. We really didn't care about them. Mm-hmm. We had an era that we really didn't care about.
Didn't even know. Right.
Yeah, they didn't even know. And part of the problem was that, after 9/11, I mean, one of the things that was more evident because of media, not just social media, but media in general, they realize what veterans what actual soldiers and Marines and all that go through, because there's actually footage of it. One of the worst events that ever happened during Vietnam War was, Way City. So one of the guys that was a dear friend of mine, Doug Kirk, was being shot at the Ohio University campus in Way City. And, he had to call, they were literally stuck there, and they had to call in. He was there for 2 days and couldn't move because, they were pinned down. They finally had a group, the Marines come in and get him out of there. There's no record of it. Mm. There's very little footage of, because there's just very little footage of it because we didn't have embedded reporters. A Shaw Valley. If anybody's ever heard about A Shaw Valley, is one of the we had 12 SF guys, another 20 support troops, took on 1,200 Viet Cong. There's no record of it. I mean, other than, the reporting of it, there's no video of it. There is GoPros uploading video from fights in, Fallujah.
Almost in real time.
In real time, in, Swat Valley and all that. So one of the things I think became apparent is what our troops are actually going through when they are deployed. And I think that I think it's better. And I think that we realize that, if you take a look at, absent of the political, theater that we're very, the kabuki theater that we used for politics, if you see a veteran, just say thank you. It means a lot, because a lot of them usually don't get, especially an older veteran, because they never came home to a parade. They never came home to, any recognition whatsoever. They were, a lot of, and everybody thinks about this, but there was instances where, veterans came through from Vietnam, they got spit on.
Yeah.
And that's
horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Well, look, we got to wrap it up with that. Great show, great. I mean, there's like 10 other things I'd love to talk to you about, and obviously we'll do our best to bring you back in and do some more of this. But as usual, we're Common Sense Ohio. You can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com, our website, where you can catch the backlog of shows, or if you just go to wherever you get your podcast, you can check us out there too. We ask everybody to do the same thing. You guys probably do. Please like it and share it, because this kind of stuff grows organically. I believe in the microphone. I believe in the round table. We have discussions like this that get out, and the more you share, if you like it, maybe your buddy will too. And lest I forget, before I wrap it up with my usual nonsense, George, thank you for your service.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what you're doing. I mean, phenomenal. So anyway, Common Sense Ohio coming at you right from the middle, at least until now.